A young couple meet and marry, but an affair rips their family apart and makes bad blood between former friends. The new couple has a lot of problems and a collection of guns at their disposal. Simmering hatred erupts into violence. Authorities are twisted and turned in a labyrinth of deception as they dig deeper and deeper to discover who pulls the trigger on Helium Road. Amarillo is the Spanish word for yellow, and the name of the 14th most populous city in the state of Texas. Settled in 1887, the name probably sprang from the color of Amarillo's subsoil. Houses were once painted yellow to honor the name. Today, Amarillo is the home of the only nuclear weapons assembly and disassembly facility in the country, which gave rise to its nickname, Bomb City. The state of Texas is considered to have some of the most relaxed gun laws in the United States.
Three WT students were sharing a house out in rural Randall County, west of Amarillo, and they were on their way to their house when they drove down Helium Road and saw this vehicle on the side of the road and what looked like maybe a body, and they were afraid to approach the vehicle, but they called 911 and the sheriff's department was dispatched. Fairly quickly, they had identified the victim as Robin Spielbauer.
Robin is a young woman with a domestic bent, inspired by her parents' happy marriage and thriving careers in the United States military. She wants the same kind of life and to be a mother, but Robin is conflicted. While she aspires to a clean-cut, nice man like her dad, she is also attracted to bad boys.
Robin was a military brat who moved with her family from North Dakota to Amarillo, Texas in 1995. Robin began working at a local cafe in Amarillo, and she soon met Jeremy David Spielbauer in 2003.
Known as JD, he tells her about his service in the Marine Corps, with combat time in Iraq and Afghanistan. The pair becomes inseparable.
Robin and JD's relationship progressed very quickly. Robin's parents, the Bledsoes, were surprised at how quickly the relationship progressed. However, they trusted that their daughter was making good decisions, and ultimately they just wanted Robin to be happy, and it seemed as if she was happy with JD.
They met in 2003 and married in 2005. After she and JD married, they had 2 children.
But parenting comes with new stresses, and cracks begin to show in their relationship. The couple decides to attend church, hoping it will strengthen the foundation of their marriage. It's at the church that the Spielbauers meet a young criminal justice student.
JD and Robin, from time to time, attended church at a place called Cowboy Church. It's up south of Amarillo, and Katie Phipps was also attending church there. And for a while, Katie and Robin actually struck up a friendship.
Robin was friends with Katie and trusted Katie in her relationship with JD. However, JD was telling Katie that his relationship or marriage with Robin was on the rocks and that they were headed for divorce. Robin and JD started going multiple times a week. Some of their friends questioned what their newfound interest in the church was, and some of them believed that it wasn't the religion that was drawing them to the church.
Katie babysits for them occasionally, and sometimes Katie's daughter sleeps over at their place.
Katie became very close with Robin and JD, and they welcomed her into the family. Robin didn't notice that the relationship between JD and Katie was growing until it was too late.
The two lovers proclaimed their feelings. Robin files for divorce, and once it's finalized in 2013, JD marries Katie.
JD and Katie had a lot of things in common, including their love of firearms. Between them, they had quite a collection of guns. There was stress in their marriage because Robin was still involved in their relationship due to the fact that JD and Robin had children together. Katie didn't like that and was jealous of the fact that Robin was still involved in their lives.
Robin moves back into her parents' home with her children in 2013, and she struggles to make ends meet. JD and Robin fight incessantly over visitation rights and child support. There's an incident where JD needs to borrow part of a $400 a month child support payment to Robin to pay for his household with Katie.
Robin is mad and depressed about JD and Katie's new marriage. To make matters worse, the newlyweds moved in down the street from Robin's parents, so she frequently had to see them while she was at her parents' house.
There was a lot of animosity between Katie and Robin, and everyone knew it. It was no secret. Everyone knew it.
With tensions high between Robin, Katie, and JD, it seems like just a matter of time before they boil over. After a series of texts, Robin tucks her two children into bed and tells her mother she'll be back later. Katie picks up her son Diego and takes him to spend the evening with her best friend. JD is in the company of someone as well.
He calls his Uncle Ty, and Ty comes over to the house, and they drink a couple of beers and talk.
Robin leaves her family and goes out into the night to an undisclosed location. Little does she know, this will be the last drive she ever takes. Amarillo is the 14th most populous city in the state of Texas. It is in Amarillo that JD and Robin Spielbauer marry and have children. But JD's affair with a mutual friend turns into a messy divorce and remarriage. The three former friends struggle to be civil. On Helium Road, April 8th, 2014, a driver notices something bizarre. What appears to be a bloodied body is spotted beside an SUV. Emergency vehicles are summoned to the scene. The morning after Robin goes out, Robin's mother wakes up to see Robin never returned home to sleep. Initially, she isn't concerned, as Robin occasionally spends the night with friends. But by later in the morning, Robin's parents call and text some of Robin's friends and hunt for her presence on social media. Robin's dad calls police and hospitals in the area. The Amarillo Police Department shows up to the house around 11 a.m. to file a missing persons report.
Under Texas law, there's no waiting period to report a missing person if the reporting person thinks that the missing person's life may be in danger.
Later that afternoon, a friend of Robin's alerts the family of a news article that shows a black SUV surrounded by first responder vehicles. It looks just like Robin's vehicle, and a parent's worst nightmare is about to be confirmed. A female victim is found beside the vehicle, west of Amarillo, near the intersection of Helium Road and West County Road 34. She's been the victim of foul play. District Attorney James Farron is contacted.
It was standard practice for the Sheriff's Department to contact me if a homicide had occurred, and once Robin's body was discovered at 34th and Helium, they contacted me, and I was present in offering advice and suggestions throughout their investigation.
Authorities note strange pink color smears on Robin's car window.
They saw damage to the vehicle, contact marks. They saw scratches, they saw paint, transfer of paint.
Something hard, probably metallic, had been used to strike that window several times and cause chip marks, and there was a pink smear on the window.
Hard objects come in contact, especially in a scraping motion or hitting motion, you're going to have a transfer of paint if there's paint on that particular object.
No wallet or phone is found on the victim, who shows the signs of having engaged in a struggle.
It was obvious that she had suffered several serious blows to her head and neck and face area.
When you see that, you look, well, this person looked like they were beat up. She looks like she was beat up.
She had injuries that were consistent with several blows to her head and face. They believe she had died as a result of blunt force trauma.
This appears to be a clear-cut case of a robbery gone wrong.
Robin's wallet was missing and her cell phone was missing when the investigation began. Whoever killed Robin took her wallet and her phone. We didn't know whether, was this a robbery? Was this just a random event out on Helium Road? By mid-afternoon, the sheriff's department had contacted her parents, and her parents had confirmed that they believed that was Robin.
Police gather information from people who know Robin.
When a spouse or ex-spouse dies, one of the first people investigators look at is the spouse or ex-spouse, but other than just a general rule, they didn't have anything at that point to point to J.D. or Katie or anybody else. Katie indicated she didn't know anything other than what she'd heard from other people who'd called her. And J.D. told the same story, that he just didn't have any information that would be of help to them. He really didn't know anything about it.
In the days to follow, the Spielbauers make formal statements. J.D. tells investigators that after visiting with his uncle, he falls asleep on the couch.
Maybe 9:40-ish, 9:50 is that. Because I started sending text messages and calling. Because I sent one to my wife. She said, we're good, everything's okay. I was like, okay.
About 10:15, he calls Uncle Ty and wants him to come back over to the house. J.D. tells Uncle Ty in the garage that night, you know, I've got a bad feeling about Robin.
I just have an uneasy feeling this seemed to be by school.
J.D. then proceeds to send Robin a text at 10:18, asking if everyone is okay.
I didn't get a text or anything from her. I was like, okay. Tried calling her, got her voicemail. Like, all right, maybe she's busy sleeping, I don't know.
Police are satisfied at first.
Robin's cell phone was missing from the scene. However, the detectives were able to recover information from her service provider.
And in those text messages, it was obvious there was communication between J.D. and Robin, and that Robin believed they were going to meet that evening of the 7th. And so, for obvious reasons, they bring J.D. back into the sheriff's office and interview him and confront him with this text message information.
Police confront J.D. with the text messages from the missing cell phone that no one ever expected to see. Newlyweds Katie and J.D. have ever-escalating tension with J.D.'s ex-wife. Robin is found murdered in an apparent robbery gone wrong. Data recovered from Robin's cell service provider shows that she had a meeting planned with J.D. the night of her murder, contrary to what he tells police.
Did you have any plans to meet Robin Money evening?
No plans.
How do you explain these text messages? Let me read these to you in case your memory's failing you.
Police ask J.D. to explain the recovered text messages.
He concedes that he wasn't completely honest with them during the first conversation. That it's true, he was supposed to meet Robin that night, but the meeting was supposed to take place at his house, which is just 2 houses down from where Robin was living with her parents. He said that they were going to meet and talk about the upcoming school year and the children and visitation and the general agenda for the children, and that she stood him up. She never showed up.
You're the last person on this earth to have contact with her, and that contact was arranging a meeting that she made.
Yes, sir. And that makes me #1 suspect no matter what.
It leaves me wondering what happened.
Nothing. Leaves me wondering too, sir.
J.D. claims he has good reason to keep meetings with his ex-wife secret. Robin and his wife, Katie, notoriously hate each other since the divorce and marriage.
His further explanation was that bad blood had developed between Katie and Robin for obvious reasons. And so this meeting, according to J.D., was going to be at his house because Katie was going to be gone for the evening visiting a friend, and so it would be okay for Robin to come over. There wouldn't be a confrontation between Katie and Robin because Katie wasn't going to be home that evening.
The reason for the animosity is interesting to police.
It's understandable that Robin would feel hostility toward Katie. Katie's hostility toward Robin was actually caused by the same suspicion that Robin had. Katie had concluded that J.D. was now having an affair with Robin. He was married to Robin, had an affair with Katie. Now he's married to Katie, and Katie believes he's having an affair with Robin. And she is just hammering J.D. every day, not only in person, but later when we acquired her phone records, her text messages for 2 or 3 weeks prior to the murder were just endless attacks, diatribes against J.D. I know you're having an affair with Robin. I know you're cheating.
In fact, in the 4 days leading up to the murder, Katie sends J.D. no less than 336 angry text messages. Katie sends an ominous message. I'll take care of this myself. And J.D. appears to hint that he knows something about the murder.
Let me run a scenario by you. Katie's not stupid. She's pretty sharp. She finds out y'all are having a meeting that night. That's why she's pissed. That's why she's not at the house. You set the meeting up, and something really bad happened.
So you're basically either saying I did something personally or physically to my wife, or I know of something.
You know something. With my very soul, I believe you know what's going on here. The best I can do, giving you the benefit of every doubt I can possibly give you, is that you have some real deep frickin' suspicions that you don't want to discuss with me.
Sir, I do have a lot of suspicions.
He did know something about the night of the 7th and something about Robin and that they were supposed to meet. But his position was, whether he lied or whether he forgot, that the meeting never occurred, that she didn't show up.
But she did show up dead on Helium Road. Investigators believe that Robin dies as a result of blunt force trauma.
During the autopsy, they find a projectile inside her skull. They x-ray the body, of course. Ballistics comes up beautiful on an x-ray, and they see a projectile. They open the skull up, they retrieve the projectile. It's a small caliber at the time.
The bullet removed from Robin's skull is examined.
We get the projectile, we would weigh it. I could hold it in my hand and tell you that it's a .22 caliber. I would then reaffirm from experience, I would throw it on the scale, check the weight, It could be a .22 caliber pistol, or it could be a .22 caliber rifle. You know, there's two types of firearms, several types of firearms that fire that particular caliber.
The slug recovered from Robin's brain is too deformed to perform thorough ballistic testing upon it.
Detectives went back to the scene where the body and vehicle were located and searched for a casing.
Took a large area around where the vehicle and body were, and they marked it off in grids with strings and stakes. They sifted through every square inch of that soil, and they recovered two broken pieces off of what looked like off of a firearm. And they also recovered a .22 caliber shell casing.
Authorities now hunt for the murder weapon.
They start looking on social media, they start looking, conducting search warrants, they start confiscating different firearms or people involved, and they seem to see this one particular gun that grabs their eye.
They find photos on social media of Katie shooting a pink gun, but then Katie removes them.
Now the Sheriff's Department and I realize that it is likely that if we get a search warrant for J.D. and Katie's house, the gun that killed Robin might be there.
When they went to the house, they were armed with information. They knew what they were looking for.
Authorities entered the Spielbauer house.
The Sheriff's Department during the search recovered probably 15 or 20 guns, several rifles, shotguns, but several pistols. Next to Katie's side of the bed in a nightstand, they recovered a 9mm, as I recall.
And they find a .22 caliber. You know, at the time, it's a .22 caliber. We're looking for a .22 caliber. When they recovered it, they says, wait a minute. There's pink on that gun, and we have pink on the vehicle.
The pink gun is examined by a forensic officer.
Also, the gun had damage to it. It's a polymer gun. The top of it's aluminum alloy. You know, there was pieces chipped off of it.
The pink paint samples from the crime scene match Katie's pink gun.
Eventually, the investigation determined that they were likely caused by that gun striking against the window while the window was rolled up. Obviously, this is intriguing, and obviously to the investigators and to me, this seemed like it would be important. If Robin were cowering inside the vehicle with the window up, and her assailant is beating on the window with that gun, trying to get her to open the window, and left that pink polymer smear on the window, now we know a lot more about what was happening out at Helium Road than we did before.
Suspect weapons will be test fired to get reference casings and projectiles to compare to the evidence from the scene. We do these comparisons using a comparison microscope, which is basically two microscopes joined by an optical bridge. So we can look at the test fires and compare them to the evidence from the scene.
In a semi-automatic, the casing can be just as important in identifying the firearm. When that casing is extracted from the semi-automatic, it leaves extraction marks on the casing that are unique to that gun. Fairly quickly, ballistics was able to match the shell casing recovered out at the scene to that .22. And the gun belonged to Katie. And nobody else ever used this gun, only Katie. There were pictures of her all over Facebook firing the gun. There were pictures of her teaching her children how to target practice using that gun. Everybody knew that was her gun.
With a clear match to her gun, Katie is brought in for questioning.
No, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I liked her, because I didn't. But my father died when I was 2. I buried my mother when I was 18 years old. I know what it feels like to grow up without a parent. I would never do that to anybody. I'm not a murderer. I may be a lot of things, but I'm not a murderer.
Her text messages, however, seem to tell another story.
On the 7th, the last communication she had with J.D. was a text message in which, again, about 3 o'clock, she accuses J.D. again of having an affair with Robin. He denies it again, and she says, I'll take care of this myself. I'll put an end to it. 7, 8 hours later, Robin's dead with a bullet in her brain, and so it was easy to think, well, I guess she took care of it.
JD tells investigators his version of events.
Got in the back seat with her and we was talking about the girls, the STARS test coming up.
JD puts Katie at the scene of the murder. Eventually, he admits he went out to Helium Road and 34th to meet Robin. He claims that Katie then showed up and caught them there together.
A few moments later, hear a tapping on the glass. End up opening the door and I see Katie there, which took me by surprise.
And that's the last time JD says he sees Robin alive. Robin Spielbauer is murdered, and her ex-husband JD lies to police about their meeting on the night of her murder.
So JD changes his story again and tells police that he did go to Helium Road on the night of Robin's murder. However, he was just talking to Robin about the kids. He states that Robin was still alive when he left the scene.
But Katie's furious texts seem to tell a tale of murder. In JD's telling of events, he leaves his uncle and goes to Helium Road to speak with Robin. But there's more. JD says Katie shows up unexpectedly.
They're bickering back at each other. I'm trying to stop the bickering. I just put my foot down and say this isn't what it looks like. We're talking about the girls. That's it. She says something along the lines of, yeah, I don't give a. I'll turn to Katie. I'll tell her, just get in the car. Let's go on. Put the foot down. This is done. I'll shut her door. And I'll go walking back to my truck.
He says, well, by the way, those chip marks on the window, that didn't happen while I was there. That had to have happened after I left because there weren't any chip marks on the window when I left.
Katie attests she and her son Diego spend the evening with friends and leave about 10:13. However, Katie's best friend can't confirm that. She believes Katie left at 9:50, which would give Katie time to kill Robin.
JD tells the police that he originally lied because he thinks that Katie may have killed Robin and he wanted to protect her.
Forgive me for if I ended up misleading anybody. I was hoping that this wasn't true. Seriously. I still love Katie with everything I got.
Katie, however, is starting to have suspicions of her own.
I don't know. I'm starting to think maybe JD did it.
Katie demands a polygraph test to prove her innocence. With her pink gun established as the murder weapon, and her husband's eyewitness testimony against her, this is a last-ditch attempt by Katie.
Polygraphs are not admissible in most criminal courts. However, police often use them as investigative aids to help include or exclude suspects.
Katie fails not one, but 2 polygraph tests. The case against her stacks higher and higher. Authorities trace Katie's cell phone and discover the night of the murder, it registers a ping off a cell phone tower.
The digital information we get from a ping tells us whether you're checking your voicemail or whether you're having a conversation or what it is you're doing on the phone. It tells us what time it took place. And it tells us you're within the range of the cell tower.
The information places Katie in a location and timeline that indicates she could have been leaving the scene of the murder.
And so when we added all that up, and the sheriff's department brought me all of that information, I filed a murder charge against Katie Spielbauer.
Katie steadfastly maintains her innocence.
I did not do this.
So you have nothing to offer?
That's not true. I don't know.
She was arrested and charged with the murder of Robin Spielbauer. After Katie had been sitting in jail for about a year, waiting trial, charged with the murder of Robin. One of the secretaries in my office mentioned that she had seen a fascinating show on television the night before, and it had to do with Wi-Fi tracking of cell phones. And we asked her, said, "Now you mean cell towers?" And she said, "No, this is different. This Wi-Fi tracking can give you the location of a cell phone down to about 30 meters. Well, this was total news to me.
Authorities reinterpret the Wi-Fi data from the night of the murder and come to a shocking conclusion.
When I got all of this information, and I talked to a dozen different experts, I realized I'd locked up the wrong person. Sorry.
July 20th, 2015, I got a call from my attorney, and he said, "Katie, Mr. Farron wants to speak with you tomorrow, and when he gets there, I need you to just sit down and be quiet." So then Mr. Farron came down to the jail, and then he turned to me and he said, "I got the phone records back." I said, "It's about time." He said, "You were never on Helium Road." I said, "I've been telling you that for 15 and a half months. He said, "Today I'm going to dismiss your case." And I fell out of the chair and I hit my knees and I started thanking God and praying and crying.
It was gut-wrenching. I wanted to personally apologize to her and tell her we were going to do everything we could to make it right.
With Katie innocent, suspicion immediately falls upon JD.
I was so angry, but at some point I had to make the decision. If he was able to kill Miss Spielbauer #1, and he was able to frame Miss Spielbauer #2, what's he going to do to Miss Spielbauer #3? It took some time to heal and get over the anger, but eventually I told Farron, "Whatever you need, I will help you."
Authorities now listen to what Katie has to say about JD. The day after Robin's murder, Katie confronts JD.
And I said, "You know, what did you do? What did you do?" And he looked at me and he said, "I don't know what you're talking about." I said, "Yes, you do. You know exactly what I'm talking about. What did you do?" And it went from JD to somebody I've never seen before. And he grabbed me by the throat and he pushed me up against the wall and he got right in my face and he said, "I handled the problem." And I just turned ice cold. And his eyes went from this demonic darkness back to JD, and you could see it in his eyes. He thought, "Oh my gosh, why did I say that? Now she knows. Now she knows." And I just looked at him. "What do you mean you handled the problem?"
JD's a clever man. He's a very clever individual. I've tried 6 capital murder trials, but this is the most amazing case of my career.
JD Spielbauer implicates his wife, Katie Spielbauer, as the killer of his ex-wife, Robin. Katie sits in jail awaiting trial for 467 days. But when the DA's secretary learns about new technology for tracing cell phone signals, Katie is cleared of suspicion and set free. Authorities look for clues with fresh eyes and a new suspect.
As Sherlock Holmes says, when you've eliminated every other possibility, whatever's left has to be the truth.
And finally I said to them, "You're telling me that not one single business in that area has cameras?" And that's when they went and found the video footage from the ATM where they saw Robin's car, and then they saw JD's truck, and then they saw JD's truck come back.
Surveillance video from a bank shows Robin Spielbauer driving past an Amarillo National Bank branch at 9:21 p.m. en route to the scene of the murder. It also shows J.D. Spielbauer driving past at 9:27 p.m. and driving back the other way at 9:50 p.m. As investigators search for more evidence against J.D., one of J.D.'s ex-girlfriends has more to say than she initially let on.
We actually interviewed her 3 times because our original source kept saying she's not telling you everything she knows, she's just afraid of J.D. We finally brought her back the 3rd time and under threat of a grand jury subpoena, and she said, all right, I'll tell you, but you've got to protect me from J.D.
To the astonishment of authorities, the woman speaks with J.D. just days before Robin's murder.
They sit out on the front porch of her grandmother's house where she lived, and J.D. tells her about his problems with Robin and Katie, and how Robin is just driving him nuts about child support and visitation, and they're having all kinds of problems, and he would just be better off if she were out of their lives. In fact, the best thing that could happen would be for her to have a bullet in her brain. And 5 days later, she had a bullet in her brain.
Not only is the testimony incriminating, it also points to a pattern of behavior in J.D.'s relationships.
I was his property. He told me where I could go, what I could wear. If he didn't want me to leave the house, he would take fuses out of my car.
Eventually, in the course of the investigation of the murder of Robin Spielbauer, J.D. Spielbauer gave 4 different versions of what happened that night.
J.D. has left a trail of clues that let investigators know he's anything but innocent. Finally, authorities are able to put the pieces together.
In his 4th version, his lie, he says, well, by the way, those chip marks on the window, that didn't happen while I was there. That had to have happened after I left because there weren't any chip marks on the window when I left.
He claimed that he saw the marks while the vehicle was parked at the sheriff's office for processing.
So I contacted the sheriff's department, and they started laughing. And I said, what is so funny? And they said, we took that window out of the vehicle and sent it to the lab in Lubbock. It's been in the lab in Lubbock 120 miles away since the day after the investigation started. So unless he can see from here to Lubbock, he didn't see any chip marks on the window at the sheriff's department.
As police revisit the evidence they had collected from the initial investigation, more and more clues fall into place.
When they executed the search warrant on the house, JD's standing there next to me and he says, you know they're going to take all of our guns, right? He was so nervous about that.
Now, at the time, nobody thought that was important. But looking back later, how did JD know they were going to look for guns? Everybody thought Robin died from blunt force trauma. Why would they be looking for guns? The only person who knew a gun would be important was the person that killed her.
We had approximately 8 firearms in the house. The only gun that was registered to me, the only one that I ever actually purchased, was a pink .22. Every time we would take it to the shooting range, it would jam.
From the very beginning, I should have been puzzled as to why would Katie take a gun that malfunctions all the time out to kill Robin when she had a wonderful 9mm that works perfectly well? And it's a larger caliber, much more effective if you want to kill somebody. If it's Katie that killed Robin, it doesn't make much sense. But if it's J.D., it makes all the sense in the world. He knows that everybody knows the .22 is Katie's gun.
Finally, another piece of evidence falls into place.
We learned during the investigation that Robin carried in her wallet her own Social Security card and the Social Security card of her 2 children. Eventually, we knew those were the only Social Security cards ever issued for those 2 children. During the search of J.D.'s truck, The deputy found inside his console 2 Social Security cards, the Social Security cards of J.D. and Robin's 2 children. If Robin always carried those Social Security cards in her wallet, how did they end up in J.D.'s truck?
How indeed, unless J.D. is with Robin the night of her murder. For the murder of his ex-wife, Robin Spielbauer, Jeremy Spielbauer is sentenced to life in prison with parole eligibility in 2046.
We want to get the bad guys and protect the good guys. It is our worst nightmare that we lock up the wrong person. But Katie spent 467 days locked in a cell because I ignored evidence that was available. I just didn't look at it close enough. I didn't look at it with an open mind.
But in the end, the evidence saves Katie. She goes on to earn a degree in legal studies.
When I was released from jail, I immediately started school. I'm the first person in my family to graduate college. I got a bachelor's degree in legal studies, and I work as a defense paralegal for a wonderful attorney here in town.
Now divorced from J.D. Spielbauer, she vows to work to help those who are wrongly accused.
I am also the director of strategy for a nonprofit called Ignite You First. Our goal is to break generational cycles of trauma and to build hope in people who have been through anything that could be considered a traumatic event.
Katie's a good person at heart. I'll never pass up an opportunity to tell the world that I made a mistake and she's innocent. She had nothing to do with the death of Robin Spielbauer.
Phoenix, Arizona, 2005. The busy western city is getting ready for another summer of fun.
It was too damn hot. And then we had 2 little stories that made it a whole lot hotter.
It starts out horrific and just keeps getting worse.
These were bizarre incidents. People were terrified.
Bodies are hitting the ground again and again. Every day is a nightmare. Nobody knows who's safe.
I think everybody, including the cops, were a little blown away.
They shoot dogs, they shoot horses. Any living, breathing creature is fair game. And now they think there's more than one. That's just a start.
Phoenix, the capital and most populous city in the state of Arizona. The city is nestled in the northeastern reaches of the Sonoran Desert, but that hasn't deterred anyone from flocking here.
They call it the Valley of the Sun, and it encompasses about a half-dozen cities, and you wouldn't know if you were in one or the other one unless you lived there. They all sprawl together.
In 2005, the locals find themselves fearing for their lives.
I think there was some period of time where we sort of this growing apprehension that this is going exactly where we all think it's going, and it's really bad.
In the nearby suburb of Tolleson, home to almost 5,000 residents, a dark presence is lurking. a presence ready and willing to take an innocent life. At first, it's random dog shootings. Then, they shoot a horse. Police don't know what to make of the animals being shot at for no reason.
So this little tiny town adjacent to Phoenix has a lot of horse properties and is basically kind of a rodeo town. And someone started shooting the horses that lived in people's front yards and in their backyards.
A horse is gunned down by a .22 caliber rifle. Police must uncover if this is a random attack or part of a bigger scheme if they hope to find the shooter.
These random shootings are taking place, and it's even more unnerving to know that they were animals. Why would somebody do this?
And don't forget, there was also different jurisdictions, so it's hard to see the big picture if you only have one or two cases.
Just these random dogs and horses that were just outside. They were easy targets.
But as the moon appears in the night sky, a dark and unnerving night is only beginning. Later that same night, things escalate.
David Estrada was a beloved young man. He had a mother who doted on him and several sisters who treated him like the pet of the family. He was musical and he was bright and he was movie star handsome. He was struggling to find his way as he approached adulthood. He left home and was living on the streets with his guitar and had a goal to make it to California, San Francisco. David was not an untethered person. He had people who wanted to take care of him. But David was following the beat of his own path and happened to be on a sidewalk that night, sleeping under the stars, something he liked to do.
Estrada has set up camp outside a bus stop nearby, and he sees a car slowly creeping up.
And someone drove up alongside him and shot him.
It's just an act of sheer cowardice on the shooter's part. Estrada was gunned down in cold blood. If it's indeed the same shooter, they've stepped up their game. You know, shooting a random horse is one thing, but killing a person randomly at a bus stop is on a whole nother level. It's almost as if the shooter was trying to get up the nerve to kill a person by shooting the horse first.
Detective Ron Rock from the Tolleson Police Department came to the murder scene of David Estrada that night, and there was change on the sidewalk next to him, money. There was a nice quality guitar nearby. So he looked at this and said, this isn't a robbery. This is not someone who came up to him and said, give me all your money or take all your valuables. So Ron Rock, to his credit, knew there was something distinct about this murder.
Well, it appears as though they drove up and offered him some change and then shot him in the face. But there's no indication or no clue as to why they did this.
Officers make a critical discovery: bullet slugs from inside the victim. The slugs are sent to the police crime lab for further analysis.
And it was, devastating to come outside in the morning and find your horse bleeding or lying on the ground dead. But these seemed isolated because it didn't have anything to do with Phoenix. It seemed like a small town case. There was a Burger King that got shot out, a murder on a sidewalk somewhere that seemed puzzling, but no one was connecting the dots.
Police discovered that the .22 caliber bullet casings that were found at the scenes where the horses and dogs were shot came from the same gun responsible for the killing of David Estrada. A profile is beginning to emerge, but will it hold up?
Exotic dancer Georgia Thompson is walking through her apartment parking lot after a late-night shift. She hears someone behind and yells at them to leave her alone, but is shot dead at point-blank range with a .38 caliber handgun. Police are perplexed. Are these crimes connected? When they look at what's happening in the city, they realize that just a few weeks earlier, a sexual assault occurs in the same area.
They were walking home and forced these two young women behind some bushes and made them undress. One of the young women was visibly pregnant.
Then, a week later, there is another sexual assault, but this one combined with a robbery. Police question locals to see if anyone has seen or heard anything. But aside from Georgia's screams moments before her death, they have nothing to go on. They plead with citizens to provide any information that can lead to an arrest.
No one could have imagined that this is just the beginning.
3 men were found shot, 2 dead in downtown Phoenix.
In the wake of so many killings, the community was just on razor's edge.
If the citizens of Phoenix were scared before, they're absolutely terrified now.
Disturbing crimes are happening around Phoenix, Arizona. Women have been sexually assaulted, and 1 murdered, and several people have been shot, randomly targeted at night, along with several dogs and horses. Using ballistic evidence, police have discovered that the same gun is used in both the David Estrada murder and the animal killings. It appears they have a serial shooter on their hands. Over the next few weeks, more incidents occur. Sexual assaults and robberies are becoming commonplace. Shortly before 10 p.m., a dog named Shep is killed. And another named Irving is shot and wounded by a .22 caliber rifle within a few blocks of each other, just north of Camelback Road in Glendale.
One of the major differences between being able to compare a .22 caliber bullet casing from that of a shotgun, for example, a .410, is that a .22 caliber casing can be matched to the firearm that actually shot it. This is very difficult, almost impossible to do with a shotgun shell.
As the canine body count rises, so too does the human count.
Nathaniel Schaffner went to a convenience store one night. He walked over, and as he walked away from the convenience store, got a few blocks away, he came upon a scene where there was a car pulled over in a dark street, and there was a gun coming out of the window, and the barrel of this gun was pointing at a stray dog that was innocently capering about the scene, trying to find something to eat. Nathaniel came up to the car and in an angry way said a lot of things to stop them from shooting the dog. Don't shoot that dog. So what happened? The men in the car shot Nathaniel instead. Sometime later, an off-duty police officer was coming home from a social occasion with his wife late at night, and as he turns down the street, his headlights light up a man laying in the street with liquid all around him. He thinks what anyone would think, this is a man who's passed out, and that's beer. And he didn't have all his equipment with him, didn't have his uniform. He didn't feel like he was the right person to handle it, but he did call it in. Paramedics arrived, and they leaned over Nathaniel Schaffner, and they said, "Oh, this isn't beer, this is blood." So Nathaniel Schaffner died protecting a stray dog.
At 6 p.m., 39-year-old Tina Washington is attacked and killed.
Even by a veteran cop's standards, it was a terrible scene.
A witness who manages to hide behind a steel door.
But the man, in his terror, was unable to give them a good description. That crime scene was very valuable to police because they found a shell casing. But the savvy detectives there at the scene noticed that she seemed to have no jewelry. Turns out that Tina Washington had what was called a mother's ring. That was gone. One of the sons told police that that was missing.
Police wondered if these killings might be connected, changing weapons for different scenarios. For example, using a handgun when he's on foot, or when he's in his car using a rifle or a shotgun. But this all changes on December 29th, 2005.
At 7 p.m., the shooting starts. First, it's a bartending school, but no one is hurt. Then, at 10:10 p.m., a dog is killed while being walked by its owner at a park. 20 minutes later, Jose Ortiz is killed on North 10th Avenue in Phoenix, and Marco Carrillo is shot and killed 1 block away. At 11:39 p.m., Timothy Torde is shot in the neck and wounded nearby. Shortly after midnight, 2 dogs are shot and killed on East Granada. A German Shepherd is also killed on North 32nd Street. At 2:15 a.m., an off-duty Marine is shot and wounded.
I think you could say the official start of the serial shooter case was December 29th, 2005. This is when 3 men were found shot, 2 dead in downtown Phoenix. And the detective working that case the next morning got a call from a detective from a tiny little police department in a tiny little town adjacent to Phoenix who said, you know, I have an unsolved case from earlier in the year. This sounds an awful lot like your case last night.
Overwhelmed with bodies and ballistics, detectives soon make a startling discovery. All of the victims of the drive-by rifle shootings are males and animals, and all of their handgun victims are female.
This changes everything. It's definitely a breakthrough in their investigation.
Could there be 2 active serial killers on the loose, both operating at the same time?
We were hearing police say serial killer, not serial killer. Oh, it's a rapist, it's this, it's that. We didn't know what was going on. If you were just a regular person not privy to everything that was happening inside the police department, you didn't know what was going on. All you knew is that you were frightened.
If the citizens of Phoenix were scared before, they're absolutely terrified now. Anything and anyone could be next.
Starting in early summer of 2005, a reign of terror has been waged over the residents of metropolitan Phoenix, Arizona. On the fateful night of December 29th, 2005, a rampage leaves 2 men dead, along with several other dogs and a wounded ex-Marine. All shot with either a .22 caliber rifle or a .410 shotgun from a passing vehicle. While these instances occur in a similar pattern, at the same time, a serial predator is haunting the areas around Baseline Road. These crimes are done on foot, using a handgun. With already 7 instances, including robbery, rape, and murder, the profiles of the separate instances indicate their worst fears. 2 separate serial killers are at work in Arizona.
Now the police are dealing with what are believed to be 2 active serial killers. They need to work around the clock to try to catch them. They decided to break the unit into 2 groups. One dedicated to catching who they called the serial shooter. The other group was dedicated to catching who they called the Baseline Rapist. The Baseline Rapist came to be known as the Baseline Killer because the victims were killed in the area of Baseline Road.
Authorities discover evidence that could further the Baseline Killer case.
It's a gunshot fired off by the rapist to scare away onlookers that conclusively ties the assaults and robberies to the murders. The police are able to match the casings to the .38.
The rapist murderer was doing everything in his power to prevent any DNA evidence from showing up at his crime scenes, from attempting to use condoms, to making the victims rub their saliva with dirt and then rubbing it over their own bodies to basically pollute any DNA that he may have left on them.
But for as carefully as he tries to cover his tracks, the Baseline Killer soon slips up. Detectives are able to recover DNA evidence from one of the previous sexual assaults. Now they have a lead. But as much as detectives learn over the course of their investigation, in 2006, his pace of assaults picks up. 18 separate attacks take place, which are all attributed to the Baseline Killer. That number rises to 23 over the next several months.
February 2006 proved to be a very bloody and terrible time. 2 women, hardworking women working in a food truck, Romelia Vargas and Myrna Palma Roman, These two women were found brutally murdered early one morning inside their food truck. And then March comes along, and another one of those headline-grabbing, gut-punching stories. You had two young workers at a Yoshi's restaurant, George Chow and Lilian Sanchez. They were closing down. These two young people murdered by what was now identified, and police were looking for the serial rapist and murderer. And shortly after that, a woman named Sofia Nunez was found dead in her bathtub, found by her young son, who was worried about his mom when she didn't come to school to pick him up.
The community is at wit's end, dealing with seemingly weekly events of new deaths and assaults. Authorities make pleas to the public to come forward if they know anyone or anything that could lead them to the killers.
The officers in the community feel helpless because people that they're sworn to protect are being targeted. All they can do at this point is hope that they collect enough evidence fast enough to bring the case to a conclusion.
Meanwhile, the so-called serial shooter hasn't struck since that fateful December 29, 2005 night. And police still haven't been able to get a description of the shooter's car. It could be anyone. The summer of fear starts when Claudia Gutierrez Cruz is shot and killed on May 2nd with a shotgun.
She'd gone in for an extra shift as a glass stacker at a restaurant in Scottsdale because she thought they might need extra help because there had been sort of a strike that night. And they said, you know what, I think we got it covered, you can go. And she came home on the bus, but the connecting bus, it was too late. So she had to walk where the further bus left her off, all the way to her apartment. And she died.
That same night, 17-year-old Kabili Tambadu is shot and wounded.
He had been sent to the store that night to pick up some milk at the convenience store, so that's why he was on the sidewalk that night. And he was shot in the back. And the 17-year-old boy who's made it all the way to America from a very troubled, traumatic background from a war-torn country in Africa, Sierra Leone, staggers from the sidewalk through the bushes into the marble floors of a hotel and drips blood with him across their marble floors and asks for help.
Over the next 2 months, the carnage holds the city hostage. During this shooting spree, 2 Walmarts are set ablaze. Adding to the general carnage that Phoenix residents are dealing with, little do police know that these fires will be key later.
It was really scary living in the Phoenix area at that time because you had 2 serial killers working at the same time. I personally am unaware of that happening, at least not commonly anywhere before. Employers were putting up flyers, do not go to your car alone. People stopped jogging, all of this, because it was just too frightening. And, you know, with good reason. People were dying and being maimed and traumatized. It was horrifying.
Detectives set up a tip line in the hopes of gaining vital information that will help them capture the serial shooter. And they get no shortage of calls, straining their resources as they try to make sense of all the leads. And just when people start thinking it can't get any worse, it does. The baseline killer strikes again, but this time for all to see.
Then along comes June 29th, in the summer of 2006. A young woman named Carmen Miranda is washing her car. Not only do they get their first sort of look at this guy, they get their eyes on the body of this guy. And as shocking as anything was just the violence and the speed of the attack. It visually confirmed what all of these other crime scenes had told police, that this was really just a ferocious, scary predator, because he set upon this woman with such speed and such force, threw her into the car, drove her off, sexually assaulted her, killed her. Her body found a short time later. In the wake of so many killings at this point, the community was just on razor's edge.
But authorities won't have time to rest. Another killer is on the loose. And July 1st, he strikes again, this time wounding Diane Bien and Jeremy Ortiz in 2 separate instances that night. With so many shootings, how can there be no witnesses?
One of the most effective things about the serial shooter style of mayhem was they took people from behind and people who weren't expecting to be assaulted. And this is why they had very little witness testimony, because people are just walking down the street and they get shot from behind and they never see what happened.
27-year-old Ashley Armenta is walking down the street when the assault happens.
When Ashley came into the hospital that night and they picked out the pellets from her scalp and police interviewed her, Ashley knew a lot about cars in general. She knew all about the model, make, year, everything. So she had a good idea of what the car was.
A light blue 1998 Toyota Camry. Despite other victims' descriptions, Ashley's is the first definitive answer to make and model of the vehicle.
One thing that was difficult for police is that when they did get a description of the car, people reported different colors. The paint on that particular car showed different in different light. It had different mixtures of paint in it, and different ones, purple, blue, gray, showed up in different light. So that explained why the color seemed different to different people.
Then, just a few days later, more carnage on the 12th of July, when Raul Lopez Garcia is shot while riding his bike in Mesa. Just when they could use a break in the serial shooter's case, a lead comes in. A phone call that will change the course of the investigation. There are 2 active serial killers on the loose in Phoenix, Arizona. The serial shooter shoots unsuspecting pedestrians and cyclists, while the baseline killer commits rapes and murders, centering his attacks largely on and around Baseline Road.
The crimes that were committed by this serial shooter were very senseless. You couldn't put a motive to it. Who was going to shoot someone's dog at the end of the leash that they're walking? Who was going to shoot a horse in someone's backyard? Who was going to shoot a guy sitting on a bus bench? Who was going to shoot a guy trying to protect a dog? These are senseless. A rape case is very specific. The motivation is obvious.
The serial shooter victims have all been shot with a .22 caliber rifle or a .410 or 12-gauge shotgun from a moving vehicle identified as a late 90s Camry. The baseline killer uses a handgun.
With video evidence recovered from the previous attack of the baseline killer, police are able to release a composite sketch to the public. He appears in the video to be an African-American male.
The informant that really broke the case of the serial shooter was a man named Ron Horton. And Ron Horton was an old drinking buddy of Sam Deaton.
Sam was from the Midwest. He was from Minnesota, where he grew up, and his mother at times had come out here to Phoenix. As an adult, he became a union electrician, so he could work a good job, but he had trouble with his temper and his reliability, so he lost his union job. Ron Horton wasn't the kind of guy who watched news or read newspapers, so he wasn't really aware very much of the whole serial shooter crisis in the area. But one night, he was at a bar with his friend Sam, and Sam said the strangest thing to him. He said, "Have you ever killed a man?"
Sammy apparently was one of those kind of guys who, when he got a belly full of beer, he shot his mouth off too much, and apparently had boasted to Ron that he had shot people.
Ron says, "No, what are you talking about?" And he noted this and thought this was really odd. Later, he did become aware of the serial shooter case, and in fact, a picture of Sam was circulated on the news from the Walmart fire. In June of 2006 was a bad month and a particularly bad night. There was a Walmart that was set on fire in the west side of the valley. One thing about Walmart is it has really good asset management. really good security. So they have cameras all throughout their stores. So the night of those two fires, they had people reviewing the video from every single camera, and they were able to determine that two guys probably set both fires. And they were able to take stills from the video, supply those to the police, which had them circulated on media. So now we had a picture of two guys with a distinctive tattoo and a distinctive T-shirt circulating for people to possibly recognize them. And Ron was fearful that maybe Sam was the guy in the picture, but he was divided because in his social circle, you don't snitch. And he felt really bad about maybe getting Sam into some trouble for no reason.
Ron didn't immediately act on this, and I think, as he would say himself, to his great regret. But in short order, after Ron had been told by Sam of the killings, a young woman named Robin Blasnick ends up being shot and killed in Mesa, Arizona. All the earmarks of the serial shooter.
Robin Blasnick was killed on the last day of July, and it was a fever pitch. I think everyone really felt electrified by Robin because she was such a vulnerable young girl that everyone felt like she was their daughter, their sister, and we thought, we can't take any more of this.
Ron Horton hears about the killing of Robin Blasnick. He thinks about his friend Sam Dietman talking about going around killing people. At that point, Ron Horton calls police and says, I think my friend Sam Dietman had something to do with this. Police then ask Horton to set up a meeting with Sammy Dietman. They meet at a place called the Stardust Inn, a little bar on the west side. Police set up a surveillance, and they wait for Sam Dietman to show up.
They asked Ron to particularly tell Sam that he could not give him a ride home, that he'd have to have someone come pick him up. They waited till Ron left, and Sam was waiting for his ride, and they saw this car drive up and pick up Sam, and it sure looked like the other guy in the photo.
A guy named Del Hausner. And that is the first time cops had the name Del Hausner, but one of the lead investigators say he was sitting in that parking lot, and when he saw that Camry pull in, he said, we got our guys.
Dale had 2 marriages under his belt. He moved on with other girlfriends, and he now had a little baby daughter with another woman. He was working for the city of Phoenix at the airport as a janitor.
Dale also works as a boxing photojournalist. He loves to feel like he's in the middle of big things.
From the moment Sam was picked up that night at the bar, those 2 men were never alone. They had a tale for the next 3 days of their lives.
They have a GPS monitoring device on Hausner's car, and Sam and Dale are just driving around aimlessly with cops following them.
The 2 men continue driving around Phoenix under police surveillance.
So they observed the car slowing down when there was a lone pedestrian. And so their strategy to prevent someone getting shot while they were watching was to speed up and get close and act like they were going to witness it, because they didn't have any way of stopping a shooting. They followed them back to an apartment in Mesa. And they had an emergency meeting with the county attorney to get an emergency warrant to do a bug in the apartment.
They went to the apartment next door, put up a monitoring device so they could listen to their audio.
They have a lot of surveillance on the apartment, and at one point they have Sam come out and take the trash, a trash bag from inside the apartment to the dumpster. One of the guys who's been hiding in the bushes jumps into the dumpster and pulls out that trash bag, and they hightail it down to downtown Phoenix to go through the bag. And what they find in it is further confirmation that they have the right guys. They find a map that's marked up with the sites of the murders. They have a soda can, pick it up, it rattles, dump it out. What's in there? A .410 shell.
The police want to make a move, but there's a problem. An unexpected person is at the apartment with them.
A complication has come up, and that is that during the time of the surveillance, Dale has picked up a very small child, about 2 years old, and brought it home with him. This is his own daughter, it turns out. And what was really awful on the tapes of the bug, they hear Dale teaching his daughter just to laugh about the killings.
Hey, good night, Sam. Nana. See you in the morning. See you in the morning. Hey, don't kill anybody.
They can't do a raid with a baby inside there, so now they have to regroup. What are they going to do?
Anytime officers gather for the purpose of doing a forceful entry to execute a search warrant or effect an arrest of a suspect, they would have to do a risk assessment. They would have to do surveillance on the property to determine if the subject that they're looking for is present and who else may be present, and that would include the presence of children. And they would have to weigh very carefully whether or not it was worth taking the risk that an innocent child may be injured in order to continue their investigation at that point. If officers determine that a child is present and there is a person of interest or a suspect who may be armed and dangerous in that location, most often we would expect that they would continue the investigation, continue surveillance, and attempt to make that arrest at a time where there's less risk to innocent people.
But can this tactic work until they lawfully arrest the killers? Arizona resident Ron Horton has just heard some disturbing news. A longtime drinking buddy, Sam Dietman, has boasted that he and his friend may be the serial shooters. Ron has no choice but to let police know. Now, police are following Sam and his friend Dale Hausner, who are cruising around in a vehicle that matches the description given by witnesses to belong to the serial shooter. Police rush to get the necessary warrants together to bring the two men down.
So this is a very harrowing night for the cops. And they also had a helicopter overhead that was observing them. And when someone on the ground could not get close enough to the car to prevent a potential shooting, they actually had the helicopter buzz the car, fly low, so that the shooters would look up and go, oh, better not do it right now.
I know that one of the investigators who was there that night following this said it was one of the worst nights of his life because he felt as if he was following two known killers who were looking for another victim, and the police still needed to do their investigation, and their biggest concern was they were going to pull a gun out the window, and before the police could interact or intervene, another victim was going to go down.
After 2 days of surveillance and everything is in its place and the circumstances that are necessary have presented themselves, it's time to bring this nightmare that is the serial shooter to an end.
Once they identified these guys and got the audio from the neighboring apartment and all the evidence, they rounded these two guys up and hauled them downtown and booked them.
The things they find inside the apartment are telling. There are guns, ammunition, and even a scrapbook of news clippings following the investigation of the serial shooter and the baseline killer.
When police executed the raid at the Mesa apartment of Dale Hausner, they found a treasure trove of information, including a whole slew of weapons, I believe about a dozen firearms. They ended up doing, I think, most of the last shootings with a shotgun. They found a shotgun and shells and casings and all kinds of ammunition. So, they were not wanting for evidence in terms of firearms and ballistics.
Police search Hausner's car and find even more evidence that Hausner and Dietman are indeed the serial shooters that have plagued the Phoenix area for the past year. The city is elated, but Dale Hausner refuses to take responsibility for the murders.
You guys have never been together doing anything violently together?
No way. No. As far as I know, no. It's not as far as I know. It's absolutely not, no. As far as any violence with us together, no.
But Sam Dietman has a different version of events.
We had heading up, I don't know what the heck it was, 32nd or 44th Street or something. So he's like, well, sit back. I'm like, all right, why? And then the window starts going down. Bought this little shotgun and fired at some fat guy who was walking down the road.
I think you're the mastermind of this entire operation, and have been from the get-go. But you involved Sam, and I think he was willing to go along.
He's shooting people, it's not with me.
No, it is with you.
Dale promptly held himself a news conference, which was a great spectacle. Dale Hausner wanted very much to be a talk show host or a circus ringleader. And a very flamboyant character, loved to talk.
On August 7th, 2006, Hausner goes public with a press conference declaring his innocence.
Why I'm here is because I have Sam Dietman staying with me for about 5 weeks. And apparently at night, Sam had been taking my car out and using various weapons that I have in my house to commit crimes. And apparently they tracked it through my car. And when they came and busted in the house, I was there. And I guess I'm just guilty by association, even though I did not shoot anybody or kill anybody.
Dale Hausner could be what is described as a classic narcissist. He refuses to accept any responsibility. He's self-focused. He lacks empathy.
I mean, it could be anybody. I mean, I don't know, but the person's got to be smart, you know, I mean, because they've been getting away with this for a long time.
Just over a month later, the citizens of Phoenix, Arizona are handed another arrest. With DNA evidence from one of the rapes, in conjunction with the ring taken from Tina Washington's body, and traces of her blood found on one of his shoes, the baseline killer is identified as ex-con and current construction worker Mark Goudreau. He is convicted of 9 murders among 90 charges. He is sentenced to 438 years in his first trial for rape and robbery, and finally to death on March 16, 2007. In the face of his crimes, Sam Dietman confesses to his involvement with the serial shooting and agrees to testify against Dale Hausner.
He flipped so quickly that night because I think he was not only tired of the crime spree, but I think he was tired of Dale. So when the police arrested the both of them, it was Sam's opportunity to get out from under the thumb of Dale and just get away from all of it, all the crimes and Dale.
Dale Hausner goes to trial on October 6, 2008. In a desperate attempt to get the audio evidence thrown out, Hausner's lawyer goes after the emergency wiretaps issued without a judge's permission. But the state prosecutor takes the stand to defend police's actions.
They had followed this vehicle. They were making wide U-turns. They were stopping at empty lots and behaving in a manner as if they might be casing various areas looking for people. I felt that it was necessary to act promptly to stop the killing.
Despite the defense's concerns, the recordings are played for all present to hear, and what the court hears is shocking.
They heard these two guys, these two knuckleheads, talking about news coverage and yucking it up about shooting people.
Oh my God, she looks familiar. No, Blasnick? I don't think so. I know what Blasnick.
They were mocking the death throes of their victims. They were congratulating each other on getting a higher number of murders.
It's now bring their total to 6. That's higher than that.
The state has heard enough. Dale Hausner is sentenced.
Of the 87 charges brought against Hausner, he's convicted of 80.
Despite appeals in 2008 and 2012, the convictions are upheld against Dale Hausner.
Dale was a wannabe. Boxing promoter, big guy, man about town. Even as a serial killer, he wanted to be a big-timer. There was never a moment where Dale said, I did this, and I'm sorry. Those are the kind of statements that may actually mean something to victims. Dale never had the fortitude to do that.
On June 19, 2013, Dale Hausner commits suicide by overdosing on antidepressants in his jail cell.
Phoenix Phoenix is a pretty mobile city. A lot of people move in, a lot of people move out. The fact is, the people who are new here didn't know who he was, didn't really care. And those of us who did know, we already knew we were safe from him. You want to do a big dramatic gesture and kill yourself? Knock yourself out. Who cares? You're irrelevant now. And I think that is the worst possible hell Dale could have, is not to be important anymore.
Now, over 15 years later, the reign of terror and the summer of fear is a distant memory. The people of these communities have moved on and rebirthed themselves in the Valley of the Sun. There is an instant attraction between the tall, likable Trenton and the young, pregnant Amber.
They went to dinner and they never spent a night apart after that.
When secrets start to pile up, things can turn deadly. Especially when someone is about to lose everything and has easy access to a gun.
The definition of a sociopath is someone who lacks a conscience or the ability to empathize with others.
A murder that shakes the very foundations of small-town America and leaves everyone asking why. When people think of Michigan, Detroit, Motor City, and the birthplace of Motown are two things that might come to mind. Very few instantly think of northern Michigan, with its wild and untamed beauty, covered in forest and locked between three of the Great Lakes, Superior, Michigan, and Huron.
Levering is a small rural community in Emmett County.
If you blink, you'll pass it on the way to the Mackinac Bridge to get to the UP, the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. Very desolate, in the middle of nowhere.
Trenton Mallory is born and raised in Levering. He's known as Trading Trent because he's always doing internet deals and trading up for something better. He likes to buy and resell guns on different marketplace sites.
When I first met Trenton, I thought he was this big, goofy, 6.5 foot tall man. He was just amazing. I knew he was a person that I wanted to be friends with. His personality just reached out and grabbed you. I worked for a big box store, and he used to come in, and he was a distributor.
Amber grows up in Charlotte, Michigan, about 3 hours south of Levering.
When Amber was little, she always had the need to make people laugh. And she just found a way to do it so naturally. She was hysterical.
Amber was sweet as pie. She really was. She always smiled. She's a beautiful person inside and out.
Because of her excellent grades, Amber receives a scholarship to go to college. She doesn't stay happy there for long, coming home at Thanksgiving, already deciding never to go back. Disappointed and exasperated with Amber's behavior, Darlene feels once again it is another argument that ends with Amber getting her own way.
Amber got into the party life and Amber got into having fun. While they expected her to get good grades, she had a scholarship. She just didn't want to do it. She was with a boyfriend she had met and she got pregnant. It just didn't work out. And there she was, home, pregnant, by herself.
With her boyfriend no longer in the picture, pregnant and living in her mom's basement, Darlene is unsure of Amber's future, but she has an idea. Amber and Trenton should meet.
They had so many common interests. I mean, they both liked the same sports teams. They were both into the outdoors, real people-oriented. They went to dinner, and they never spent a night apart after that.
They move in together immediately.
They kind of reminded you of a little old married couple. They just bicker, and then it was just a big joke. And their relationship was so full of love and energy. When I saw them together, it just made my heart beam, because it was like Amber had finally found what she was really looking for.
Trouble soon strikes the happy couple. At 3 months old, their son is rushed via helicopter downstate to the Children's Hospital with an enlarged heart. He is diagnosed with cardiomyopathy.
And it was so severe, he had to be on a transplant list, and he had a Berlin heart. It was actually a heart on the outside of his body that pumped the blood through him.
The medical care for this child was putting them in a financial ruin.
Medications upward of $5,000 a week are vital to their son staying alive and not covered by insurance. To make matters even worse, their son develops leukemia generated by the cardiomyopathy and medication. 4 weeks before her son is to get his heart transplant, Amber and Trenton find out she is pregnant.
The heart transplant took a real toll on them. I mean, they were both exhausted. At one point, Amber just was like, I can't deal with a relationship and this. And Trenton was like, no, we're a family. You don't walk away from family. We will work on this.
Amber needs a break from the stress of the overwhelming medical bills and looking after her constantly sick child. She decides to head to the casino one night and blow off some steam. To her surprise, she wins $1,200.
Date night was the casino. Amber got Trenton going, and then they both just really liked it. They would go to the casino at least once a week.
Things finally seem on the upswing for the devoted couple. The oldest boy has had his heart transplant, is in remission from his leukemia, and their youngest son is born healthy.
It just made my heart beam, because it was like Amber had finally found what she was really looking for.
Amber didn't just, slide over the bar. She wanted to be the best. She wanted to be the best mom at school. She wanted to be the best partner to her husband. She wanted to be the best, everything.
The morning of March 6, 2014, starts off bright, cold, and crystal clear at minus 21 degrees Fahrenheit. It's also a busy morning for Amber. Her first stop is to buy snacks for school at the local store.
Amber had left the residence that morning to take her kids to school. She left about 7:05 a.m. When she left, Trent was sleeping in bed. Normally they took the bus. This morning she decided to drive him to school. She went to a small store in Pellston where she purchased a snack for her son to take to class that day.
Next stop is to take her younger son, who has been sick for a few days, to the local clinic.
And while she's sitting there waiting for her son to be evaluated by the doctor, she texts Trent at about 9:13 a.m. with no response from him. After they leave Quick Care, they go to pick up a prescription for the son.
Amber makes her last purchase at 9:46 a.m. before heading off to her sister Amy's house for a quick visit. Amy lives with her partner Mike, about 20 minutes away from Evering, but no one is at their place, so they head home, arriving at around 10:30. Little does Amber and her son know what is waiting for them at their home. The morning of March 6, 2014, starts off bright, cold, and crystal clear. It's also a busy morning for Amber. Little does Amber and her son know what is waiting for them at their home.
The initial call was March 6, 2014 from Amber Smith. She indicated that when she returned home that morning, the door was ajar to their residence.
And she walks inside and she sees the house in disarray. It wasn't like how she left it. There's pill bottles all over the place. The drawers are pulled out. So she just gets inside the house and sees this.
She stated that she did not see Trent, backed out and went to the car and called 911. The Emmett County Sheriff's Department deputy responded to the scene, made contact with her.
Okay, so the inside door is open.
Which I just thought was weird, you know. But I mean, Trent is the most forgetful person that I know, so I was like, hey, he just forgot to shut the door. Maybe he didn't get up.
And I'm sorry, so you're out? Are you outside when you call 911?
I told Carson to get his boots back on and get back outside, which he did. And I told him to get in his car seat just because I knew he was safe inside the car. I dialed 911 and then I sat in the car with him.
There was some medications that were in the kitchen cupboard that were thrown down onto the counter as though somebody was going through the medications. There was a small Century beige style safe that was open, laying on the floor. You know, the contents of the medicine cabinet and the cabinet where the sink was at had been thrown askew onto the floor. They had a number of guns. Upon entering the bedroom, the deputy could see that there was a subject laying in bed. He had the covers, blankets up to his neck. There was obviously visible sign of trauma to the subject's head, and he was deceased in bed.
There's no doubt in the deputy's mind that he has found Trenton Mallory. A detective soon arrives on the scene and starts speaking to Amber, hoping to get a clearer picture as to what has happened. As hard as it is to question someone minutes after they've learned their loved one has been murdered, it's imperative to find out as much as possible and as quickly as possible about the victim.
There is absolutely nothing easy to say, to do, to make you feel any better in the situation, so I'm terribly sorry for this.
It's not your fault. But you can help, right? You can figure it out.
That's what I'm here for. I'm going to figure this out. I got to ask you a lot of questions, so as you may know, or may not, time is of the essence in the situation, I guess, okay?
The reporting person always needs to be cleared. Spouse, a fiance, a girlfriend, anybody that's close to the deceased. You're going to want to clear them with an alibi or at least verify their story the best you can and get a better picture of what's going on.
At the beginning, the world is wide open as far as potential suspects goes. Trenton is Mr. Nice Guy. He is a hard-working family man. There is nobody that can be found who would say anything negative about Trent or who can give a reason as to why someone would want to kill him.
Who doesn't like Trenton? Who would be his biggest enemies?
Everybody likes Trent. He's such a good guy. Everybody likes him.
Enemies?
I don't think so.
Trenton's the most amazing man ever. I couldn't love him more if I had given birth to him. Trenton was so special and so kind. He would do anything for anybody.
If this, in fact, is a homicide, if it is, I would assume that you would cooperate to the fullest. And that means taking computers, phones, anything.
That's fine, I don't care.
With the cooperation of a grief-stricken Amber secured, police start tracking movements, calls, and texts between her and Trenton and others involved in their lives.
Inside of the bedroom where Trent was located deceased, there was a gun cabinet. In there was approximately 5 long guns. Underneath the bed in a case was another long gun. And then there was another long gun that was propped up against the closet door in the bedroom, along with ammunition and other hunting supplies.
Trenton's body is removed by the medical examiner. The autopsy shows that Trenton has died from a single gunshot wound to the left side of his head, an inch or two behind his ear.
The projectile used to shoot Trent was a .22 Super X long rifle bullet. The spent projectile removed from Trent's head at that time by the autopsy appeared to be .22 caliber, which would be consistent with the empty casing found next to the bed. Medical examiner placed the time of death on March 6, 2014 at 9 a.m. And based on the alibi that was presented by Amber Smith at that time, she was not at home at 9 a.m. as the time of death that was indicated on Trent's death certificate.
Police officers came and knocked on my door and asked me if I knew Trent Mallory, and I said yes, and they told me that he had passed away. And I was like, you know, where did the accident happen? And they're like, he was murdered.
Amber Smith comes home to discover their house has been broken into and ransacked. Even more horrible, her fiancé Trenton is found murdered in the master bedroom, lying face down on the bed with severe head trauma.
I have to tell you that we are treating this as a homicide. Okay?
It was very plausible that this was a break-in, and Trent just did not wake up, and, you know, somebody actually shot him while attempting to steal stuff from his house.
At this point, what's going to happen at this point is basically a bunch of investigators are going to be at your house for a period of time, okay? All right? Now, when you pulled up to the driveway, you saw the inside doors open. The screen was shut, but it's always a little ajar. Right? When you walked into the house, did you yell for Trenton at all?
No, because I didn't know if he was still sleeping or not. So.
Okay.
The world was wide open as far as to potential suspects and who would want to kill Trent, who would want to break into their house, who would know that Amber and the kids had left at the time they did. So it was a matter of digging into Trent's life and to Amber's life and to the family's life to see, is there something that we don't know about? Is there's something going on?
Detectives begin coming up with various scenarios and suspects, and slowly start to eliminate those with an alibi.
How did the person get in the house? Was there forced entry? Did they break into the house? I mean, how did they gain entry to the house to commit this crime?
They're way out in the middle of nowhere.
There's so many people that he's always dealing with from work, and people swing by, and he tells me who they are, but if you understood Trent, there are so many people that he knows and that know him, and, you know, they'll stop by or will swing by someone else's house. So.
Trenton was buying items like from sporting goods stores, trail cams, and, you know, different kind of weaponry, you know, hunting rifles and hunting gear. And he was buying them and then selling them on Facebook Marketplace.
They kind of started looking at that aspect of Trading Trent was his nickname, that maybe he just got in with the wrong person.
So we're basically in the middle of nowhere, right? Basically in the middle of nowhere. And why, if I were to tell you that it's a possibility, okay, that somebody caused the death here, that somebody caused the death to Trenton, who do you think would do such a thing?
Nobody would do that. Trent buys and trades a lot of stuff, so there's always people coming and going, buying stuff or selling stuff.
People involved in the trading and bartering world are not always what or who they seem to be. Many people post items for sale with descriptions that are not always accurate. The old saying, buyer beware, still rings true, especially when buying, selling, and trading guns and ammunition. Occasionally, stories of deals gone wrong will reach police.
Her husband says that Trent had told him that he was dealing with a person down in Big Rapids with guns.
That guy was so mad. Trent was mad too because he drove out there and it wasn't just for a gun. She had a tractor for sale, like a garden tractor. And they were selling it really cheap. And then I was like, okay, well, if it, runs fine, then we'll definitely buy it. And he got there and said that he didn't want to buy the tractor because, it wasn't in the shape that he thought it was in. He just started yelling at him and swearing at him. And
Yelling at Trent?
Yeah, and Trent was like, well, I'll still buy the rifle or the shotgun from you, but, I don't want the tractor. And they just went off on it.
Okay. You know the names of these people?
I have no idea. I know they blocked us on Facebook, so we couldn't even see their phone.
People are selling guns. They use guns to trade and barter in rural areas. None of those guns were taken. They were just left there. I mean, if anything, you can get money from guns, but they were left behind.
They had TVs, they had trail cams, they had hunting equipment, they had a lot of guns, all things that would be particularly desirable for somebody who had a nefarious intent, okay? They had some money. They did have some cash on hand, that there'd been a big fundraiser in the area, and they'd gotten some cash. And they had drugs, okay? Not street drugs, they weren't like that, okay? But they had drugs that were marketable, maybe. Guns, money, and drugs, that's what drives the world, right?
That's a red flag. Why would somebody break and shoot somebody and not take anything? Well, it's telling me somebody wanted somebody dead.
If the motive is not to steal anything, what other reasons would someone have to want Trenton dead?
Is there a reason why anybody would want to take Trent out of the picture? And we really struggled to find too many people that really fit that bill. We did learn of that Amber did have an affair within the last few months prior to that.
After the transplant, she had started contacting a previous boyfriend and started, doing things that just were so out of character. It was like she needed to escape her own life. And it didn't turn out very well.
How well do you know Ryan Hunter?
Ryan Hunter? I used to work with him.
How well do you know?
He cheated on his wife with me. Mm-hmm. I work there.
Okay. And when was the last time you contacted him?
I talked to him 2011.
2011? When was the last time you talked to him?
We talked on Facebook. Maybe it was 2012. I don't know. It was a couple of years ago.
Right. Well, it was 6 to 8 months ago.
Excuse me?
Correct. We have those.
6 to 8 months ago?
That's correct.
Law enforcement always has to make sure that anyone having an affair with the partner of someone who is murdered is also not an accomplice or guilty of that murder. In short, to eliminate the affair as a motive for the murder. In northern Michigan, detectives continue to focus on breaking and entering, with Trenton Mallory's hobby of buying and selling guns as a possible motive for his murder.
Why would somebody break and shoot somebody and not take anything? Well, it's telling me somebody wanted somebody dead.
One thing that interests detectives is that Amber has yet to ask how Trenton died.
Do you know how he died?
No, nobody.
Huh?
Nobody told me.
Are you curious? Right, so there's several different ways that a homicide could occur, correct? Do you agree?
Yeah.
So he was shot. But it appears that he was sleeping when this occurred. look at this from the detective's point of view, okay? We're in broad daylight.
Yes.
A house in the middle of nowhere, right? There's a truck parked in the driveway, okay? The door's open. There's neighbors, all right? And then all of a sudden a person is shot in his sleep at the house. Does that sound odd to you?
We interviewed Amber, and the details changed. There was just little things that would change over time because it's hard to keep track of all those inconsistencies, which, made her a prime suspect, but certainly didn't put us over the top where we could charge her at that point.
Another thing detectives are soon able to rule out is whether this is a burglary with narcotics being the primary goal. It's been observed that the kitchen cupboards and medicine cabinets have been gone through, and prescriptions and pill bottles scattered everywhere.
I see a lot of medication in there. Who's that for?
There's antibiotics in there. I had a bunch of dental work done. Marshall takes meds. We buy a lot of over-the-counter cold products and stuff when they're 88 cents at Walmart. Oh, it's just a bunch of random stuff.
Her son had a lot of medications, being a transplant person, and they thought maybe if he had narcotics or something, but these medicines were very dangerous for anybody who didn't need them. But they thought maybe it was for the medications because we do have a lot of drug problem here.
It's like a safe, like a fireproof safe, and that's open. Is that usually locked?
Well, it's locked, but the keys sit right on top of it. Like, we're not real safe about it.
Okay. What?
I mean, if we leave somewhere, we take the keys with us. Like, if we go, away for a day or two.
Mm-hmm.
Or if, someone comes over to babysit, we put the keys away. But usually the keys are just sitting there.
What could they possibly be looking for in there? They're opening up the safe, they're going through drawers. The person's going through a lot of different things.
I mean, we've got guns in there. Trent's hunting rifle since enough, and he's got a couple guns that he would trade away.
So, if I was a bad guy and I wanted to walk in there and get something,
I mean, we keep money in the house. People know that we normally have cash on hand if we need something.
Okay. Who are these people that know that?
I don't know. I imagine if you said that somebody got into the safe, that they took our money, which, whatever. But I don't know why anybody would hurt Trent, because if they needed the money that bad, he would just give it to them.
One of the big challenges detectives face is the discrepancy in statements between family members and friends. Often, people remember things differently for a number of reasons. Some of those reasons are innocent, others are not. In the case of Amber's statement, things are not adding up the way they should.
Sound like you guys had an amazing relationship.
Wow, it was. I mean, I've known Trent for a long time. We went on a blind date 10 years ago, and I chased that boy, and he just didn't want anything to do with me, and, we were the greatest friends. But then I decided to go off and get engaged to somebody else, and then all of a sudden he was interested in me. It was fine, and then Marshall came along, and, he loves kids. There's nothing in this world that Trent ever wanted more than to be a dad. He just always wanted a house full of kids. We realized that we know each other better than most married couples know each other because we were best friends. And, we tried to date, and then the stuff happened with Marshall, and, it was just too much stress for me, trying to deal with a dying child, and I was pregnant. But then after Carson was born, we figured it out.
Investigators are having a hard time reconciling Amber's insistence that this is a burglary gone wrong with the facts of the case.
Amber tried to claim that this was a burglary. There were a few things that were disheveled. The victim was killed with a .22 rifle. Despite the fact that she claimed this was a burglary, forced entry into the home, there were numerous other guns in the house that were untouched, and the murder weapon was missing. As the investigation unfolds, it turns out that Amber and Trenton had been advertising this particular .22 rifle for sale. She actually had held it up with the serial number on one of the photographs, proudly advertising it for sale. It's the one gun that's missing from their home. At first she claimed she had no knowledge of that gun. She had never held that gun.
And later, looking at her social media, she's got the gun in her hand and she's advertising it for sale.
Even though under Michigan law, prosecutors do not need to prove a motive to get a conviction, investigators still want to know the why of the case. Usually, so does a jury when it involves murder.
What we found out in digging into their finances was their house was in foreclosure. One of their vehicles was being repossessed. They were severely behind on other loans as well. They had a mountain of credit card debt. And in addition to all of that, Amber was taking out Payday Friday loans continuously at 300% interest just to get money. Why? Because she had a gambling addiction. She spent an exorbitant amount of money on gambling. Most, if not all, of these loans and this debt were taken out by her, and they were in Trenton's name. She tried to take out a loan in his name even after he was murdered.
As far as anybody knew, their relationship was still real good. But I saw, as Amber's mom, I knew what was out of characteristic for her. And when I heard her calling creditors saying Trenton had changed his phone number and she would give him hers, all of a sudden my mailbox in Charlevoix, which is like 70 miles away, is filling up with their mail. She's just like, I don't want to burden Trenton with all the knowing about all these bills because he's so worried about them. She just got very manipulative. Amber had come to me at one point and told me that, she was really in a financial bind. I took a loan out and I loaned Amber the money. Well, 6 months later is when all these bills started arriving in my mailbox. And I said, Amber, I took a loan out. I bailed you out of your financial trouble. What is all this? Well, she had over $25,000 in debt at the casino alone. And plus they had credit card debt. She had stopped paying the mortgage. The house was in foreclosure. The car had been repoed a few times. In fact, one time when it got repoed, she told Trenton that her and I got into an argument and she threatened to run me over with the car, so the police took her car. And he believed it. I had been watching Amber unravel for months. She was doing things like alienating the whole family against each other. When Amber gets into a situation, her first instinct is to just totally do away with it. There was no Amber sitting down talking to Trenton about their finances or anything. She just killed him.
As fingers continue to point to Amber, detectives do their best to try and get some answers from her that make sense.
I gotta tell you that there's a piece of information or piece of evidence that we have. It's in the lab right now. We're there. I can't tell you. It could be anything from blood, fingerprints, shell casings. I can spend 22 shell. If you have a fingerprint, I spend 22 shell, or DNA in a 22 shell. Okay. Those type of things, all right? And we found the spent shell that was used, okay? There's DNA, all right? Is there any possible way that your DNA could be on that shell?
There's a lot of 22 shells discarded at my house. We were shooting a 22.
We know that shell is the shell that was used to strike Trent, okay? What I'm asking you is a simple question, though, right? Is that 22 shell the one that we have, okay, that potentially has a fingerprint and DNA on that shell? Is that going to come back to you?
No.
You better be absolutely certain, because I'm telling you right now, what you're saying is not necessarily true.
I can't explain it for you.
Why is that?
I did not shoot Trent, so... So you asked me if my DNA would be on that spent shell casing, so I would say no.
In northern Michigan, Trenton Mallory has been murdered, and his fiancée, Amber, is under suspicion.
There was no Amber sitting down talking to Trenton about their finances or anything. She just killed him.
The one thing that was missing in the case was the murder weapon. We had a pretty good circumstantial case against her, but without that murder weapon, we didn't have the smoking gun, so to speak. And several months later, when the snow melted, at her sister's house, her sister sees this .22 rifle buried in the snow. Did the right thing, called the police.
Detectives strike gold when they receive a call from Amy, Amber's sister, telling them she thinks the missing murder weapon is sticking out of a snowbank at her partner Mike's house. Quickly, detectives persuade Amy to allow them to record a conversation with Amber, asking her about the gun.
I need to talk to you. I went up to Mike's house, and when I was leaving there, I noticed something in the snowbank, and when I stopped
I put it there yesterday, and I was going to stop at Mike's house today and talk to him.
You put the gun in the yard?
I just bought it because I wanted something for home protection. What did you do with it?
I didn't touch it.
Oh, okay.
Are you kidding me? I didn't know it. I mean, it looks a lot like the gun that they had a picture of. They said there was a gun missing, and so I was just shaking. I was freaked right out. If you could go right to Mike's and get it, because I just got to get out of there.
All right, I'll be there with you.
Amber makes up this ridiculous story about having bought a gun for protection after Trenton was killed, and she was just basically storing it in the snowbank at her sister's house.
When Amber was little, she was as stubborn as they came. I mean, she was headstrong. And Amber, even as a little girl, could never accept defeat. And if Amber failed at something, she took it so hard that she would find ways to cover it up.
Dude, I totally misunderstood what he said to me. I was buying a gun from a person named Snow and asked them to meet me at Mike's house. Not that somebody stuck a gun in your snowbank.
I just don't get this stuff.
I don't either.
I love you, but I mean, you didn't do this, did you?
No, I didn't do it.
So the sister said, well, come out here and get rid of this thing. Come pick it up. And of course the police were there waiting for her.
I'm recording.
Amber does show up in her vehicle, which is recorded, and you can see she gets out of her car and she's kind of looking around, and she's physically starts to use her hands to dig in the snowbank looking for the rifle, but is unable to locate it.
She's coming back to her car.
It was no longer there because the police had removed it. They confronted her about it, and of course she did what sociopaths do. She lied and denied anything.
I talked to her right in the driveway and told her that, we had retrieved a gun from the snowbank, and that she had just talked to Amy about the gun. So you don't have any idea? Because it appears to maybe be the same gun that we're looking for.
That's what she told me.
Well, this is the point right now, Amber, that your story's starting to unravel.
Okay.
We've told enough things that are half-truths, untruths, and just flat-out lies at this point that they're all coming back to bite you.
You don't have an explanation this time. You putting a murder weapon inside your sister's snowbank?
I didn't.
You didn't? You didn't put that gun in that snowbank?
We've now collected the murder weapon that killed your fiancé out of your sister's driveway. Okay? And where do you think that is right now?
I have no idea.
That's at the lab being processed for a lot of different things. She denied knowing anything about the gun being in the snowbank. So no matter what you confronted her with, she just denied.
When a gun is recovered, before it comes to the lab for an analysis, it's sent to another lab. It's sent to like a serological lab where they swab the gun for DNA and fingerprints. Now keep in mind, this gun was in a wet environment, was in snow. Your probability becomes lower to try to get any kind of physical evidence. Not impossible, Not impossible. You still can, but it's very difficult. I believe in this particular instance, they did remove some fingerprints off of it. They had her prints on file, and they compared them to Amber's prints, and they found out to be a match.
In a case like this, you want to have all that forensic evidence processed before you actually make arrests. So in this case, we chose not to because we were still waiting. Now that we had the rifle, they could do the test firing of the rifle. And in that process, they're going to compare the firing pin from that rifle to the firing pin from the casing that was retrieved out of the bedroom where Trent was killed, along with the actual spent projectile that was removed from Trent's head with the rifling of the rifle itself. Once you have those pieces of the puzzle, it becomes very clear that rifle retrieved from the snowbank is the same rifle that was posted by Amber and also was the one that killed Trent.
In her alibi, in her recitation of the events of that morning, Amber clearly detailed where she had been. And one of the places she said she stopped that morning was her sister's house. So her own statement connected her to where the gun was eventually located after the snow melt the following spring.
The ballistic analysis confirmed that the casing located in the bedroom next to Trent's body was matched to the rifle, the 10-22 Ruger rifle that was recovered from the snowbank. The projectile removed from Trent's head was also matched to the 10-22 Ruger removed from the snowbank. And when the gun was retrieved out of the snowbank, there was actually a live round in the chamber that was ejected, which was consistent with the same ammunition used to kill Trent.
Amber committing the crime was all about she couldn't admit that she had really messed up. They were losing their home and everything, and Trent had no idea. She had hid it from him so well.
I guess I can't get inside Amber's head for why she killed Trenton. After talking to her numerous times, she is a total narcissist. It's all about Amber.
The truth's going to be that you shot your fiancé in bed while he was sleeping with a rifle that you put in your sister's driveway. It's going to make you look like this cold-blooded killer that thinks about nothing except herself.
When the gun was found in the snowbank and turned over to the forensic laboratory, the case basically turned into a slam dunk against Amber. At that point, it was frosting on the cake. There was indisputable evidence at that point that Amber was guilty.
Even Amber's perfect alibi, which she has so carefully constructed, would not stand up in court.
We got a guilty verdict, I would say within a half hour.
Amber Smith was convicted for first-degree murder and felony firearm. That conviction is an automatic life sentence without parole. She is getting sent to prison forever, and it's never going to be out in her lifetime.
I'm 100% sure she's guilty. I felt like I lost a son and a daughter.
Everybody said he was the nicest guy in the world. He was the best father, not only for his own son, but her son as well.
Never in my wildest dreams did I think she was capable of taking a life. Especially someone like Trenton who gave her the world.